We'd write with a Sharpie on a piece of paper, hey, we're looking to buy a couple houses in this neighborhood. And then you photocopy that on this bright colored paper and you put it on houses in the morning. And so we would get up and we would walk neighborhoods. It was Texas, so we would do it in the morning. And we did the work. We drove to a neighborhood, spent 2-3 hours putting flyers on people's doors. And she would talk to people. I would avoid them like the plague. But that's how we got started. There were sometimes we would get back to the car and we'd already have a couple of voicemails. Well, we were musicians, and musicians have a lot of free time, and so we were working with the art auctioneers on board. And then Danielle found out how much art auctioneers make, which was exponentially greater than what musicians made on the cruise ship.
Yep.
And so next thing I know, my cabin door gets thrown open and says, "You're going to be an art auctioneer." And so it was about maybe 4 months later, we got off the cruise ship as musicians, and like 2 weeks after that, we got back on a cruise ship as art auctioneers. This was all fine and dandy until 2008 when the real estate crash happened, and it was hard to sell artwork to people that were losing their houses. And we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do next, and we were both drawn to real estate. And we really wanted to do it. And what's the first thing most people do? Not everybody, but most people, when they want to get into real estate, they go and get their real estate license.
That's right.
And so we studied and got our realtor's license, and we got our license September of 2008. And if you know the time frame, the time frame of that, that's like being a bad comic. It's all about timing. and so we got our license, and it took us 8 months to do one deal as realtors. Mm-hmm. And we're like, okay, this isn't fun. When we started living on land, that nest egg started to dwindle. And then when it took 8 months to do one deal as realtors, that was really digging into our savings. When we went into the real estate investing, we're like, okay, how can we do this? But let's keep it on a shoestring budget. Let's try to not use as much money, because a lot of the strategies were no money from us. Mm-hmm. And so the story about doing the multicolored paper, we'd write with a Sharpie on a piece of paper, hey, we're looking to buy a couple houses in this neighborhood. And then you photocopy that on this bright colored paper and you put it on houses in the morning. And so we would get up and we would walk neighborhoods. It was Texas, so we would do it in the morning. And we did the work. We drove to a neighborhood, spent 2-3 hours putting flyers on people's doors. And she would talk to people. I would avoid them like the plague. But that's how we got started. There were sometimes we would get back to the car and we'd already have a couple of voicemails. And so we knew that back then, this is what we want to do, because we loved it. It wasn't work. It was, yay, I get to put fires on houses today.
It really was fun.
It was
Oddly
fun.
Enough.
Yep, it was fun.
Yeah, so I like that you really did the start, right? That was kind of the engine that got us started. And the key for us is that we did hire a mentor so that we could skip the learning curve, right? And in that market, that was more critical than ever to understand the market and which strategies were going to work. So we were successful doing that. We also teamed up with people in that. There was like 5 of us that were doing it together. And that's another theme of our life and our freedom journey, is that we've always believed in having a team around us for accountability purposes and just simply to have more fun. So from doing those types of deals, then we're in Texas for that, right? And so is Arizona our next trip?
Yes, yeah. So we were in Texas and we were doing multiple ways of real estate investing. And then your mom got sick and was in the hospital. And so
she was in the ICU.
We had lived in Texas for 10 years at that point, and we're like, I think it's time. And so we loaded up the truck and moved to Arizona, just north of Phoenix. And so we got there, but all of the strategies that we were doing in Texas, it wasn't as amenable to do them in Arizona. We could, it was just not as easy. But wholesale properties were, you could throw a rock and hit a wholesale house in Phoenix. And so that was a strategy that we focused on while we were in Arizona. And we got that down really, really well. I put a lot of miles on the car because I was driving for dollars every day, but that's how we found our deal. That's how we
found, So the landlord, about 6 months or 8 months into us living there, they got foreclosed on, or they were getting foreclosed on. So they asked us if we could move so they could move back into their.
I think it was the phone conversation went, so Do you need 30 days or 60 days to move out of the house?
So I'm going to go into why saying that this little part of the story I feel like is important, because at that point in time we were like, okay, what do? We pack up this big house. It was a really beautiful, nice, big house that we were in. And we pack up this, big house and then moved, somewhere else within Arizona, or, hey, we're working with this guy in Ohio and we're actually doing really good things.
And he kept saying, if you lived in Ohio, we could do more deals
Exactly.
together.
So suddenly we're like, maybe we should move to Ohio. Flip's was born in Napoleon, Ohio. So he was just like, hey, it's moving back home to me,
That's
essentially.
Right.
I had never lived somewhere where it frequently snowed, so it kind of felt a little exciting. And ultimately, we decided to move. So that's our story. And the reason I tell you this part of the story, and you're going to hear it frequently as we continue sharing our freedom journey, is that everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
And Flip likes to say you can never tell good from bad. So having that phone call and just be like, what? Like, you want us to move? We just got here. Like, we've only been here 8 months. That, at the time, I bet, I can't even remember the feeling, but I bet it felt horrible. And in 2017, we formed Freedom Real Estate Group, which is our very first company of our Freedom family of companies. We hired our first admin who worked out of our house.
Yep.
And then we ended up getting an office, and we ended up hiring a salesperson, I think was the very
Sales and
first
marketing,
person, sales and marketing person. And then we hired a transaction coordinator. That was our third hire, right? And then it didn't take but 6 months for us to be knocking down an office wall because we were growing so fast. Freedom Real Estate Group was a turnkey marketing company, and we were buying houses, rehabbing houses. We were going to tenant the houses, but we were outsourcing everything but the marketing piece.
Right.
We were building our audience. We were getting to know the buyers who wanted a product like this, and we were selling them that product. But we outsourced renovations, we outsourced property management, we outsourced acquisitions to the wholesalers that were bringing us deals. We were losing customers because our property management, we had outsourced it to like 5 different people. But prior to that, we were struggling just getting started because the contractors were just, quite frankly, ripping us off.
Yeah.
They were doing a bad job.
Nice way to put it.
Yeah, they were doing a bad job. They would take pictures of things that were finished, but it was like you take a corner of a painted wall and go, look, the room's painted. And if you actually went there and walked there in person, you realize the rest of the room is not painted, and you're paying somebody for doing a job that's only partly done. Or they take pictures of different houses that aren't even yours, and you don't know because you don't have time to be on site all the time to watch them.
Yep.
So the very first company that we bring in-house, not expecting to build this company, was a renovation company. It was called Bulldog Renovations when we first pulled it in.
Right.
And we hired a project manager to be able to be accountable to us, to be on our side. You go to visit the house, make sure they're actually in the house, make sure they're actually doing the work, walk the property before we pay them. Let's make sure that we don't lose these companies before we've even gotten started. So that was the first company that we brought in, and now it was out of necessity. And then the second one that we brought in, which was actually our third company, was property management, because we outsourced it to 5 different property management companies. And there was just mismanagement on all levels. Since we brought property management in-house, we went ahead and built a brokerage, because you have to have a broker to have a property management company. So having a retail arm of that, where you can have agents in there that are buying and listing properties, that meant that every time we bought a property that was a retail flip, not selling to an investor, actually selling to an owner-occupant, we could go ahead and list it through our brokerage and keep all the money in-house. So that was company number 4. That wasn't built out of necessity. It was just built because we had to build the property management company anyway.
Might as well.
And then the 5th one, I'm going to let Flip tell you about, because he was in charge of acquisitions.
Yeah, so I was the acquisition department.
Yes.
And so I was responsible to get all the properties in every week, and I was constantly bombarded with Danny and or Tiffany saying, we need more properties. And there was this one time when they said they needed more properties, and I reached out to all my contacts, which were wholesalers, because that's typically where we got their properties from, and nobody had any deals. And that's when we went, uh-oh, we need to, this is bad. And so that was bad news. That was when we realized we need our own acquisitions department. And so that's when we created Cash for Ohio Houses, again, out of necessity. And that one's been a slow struggle, but it's finally getting into its stride now. Yep. And it's, so that way we're in control of our acquisitions. We can control everything that's coming in. Now we still deal with wholesalers. We buy a lot of property still from wholesalers, just not as much, and we have more control.
Yeah. That was the day we went, if we didn't think we achieved freedom at this point, because it really felt like we had 5 more jobs with 5 other companies. Yeah. If we didn't think that we are on the road to freedom or have achieved it, that was the day we went,
Yep.
Boom, we did it. And we were so excited. The team was excited. We fell in love with multifamily because of the economies of scale, that we were able to reduce the cost, that $800,000 budget. The cost got reduced largely because our contractors were willing to do the work for less because they could buy in bulk and they could put all the materials on site. They weren't having to drive to Home Depot and Lowe's every single day. It was just a wonderful, terrifying experience for our very first deal. But that really was the culmination, I think, of our freedom journey, and what launched company number 6. And we said, hey, we want to do more of this. We are going to intentionally build this company, and it's a fund management and syndication company. That's where we are. We had hired a CEO even as we built that company number 6 to run companies 1 through 5, so that we could, just make sure that these companies were taken care of while we built the new one. And really, that's where we were. It was truly a win-win. And we said, this is it. All of the hard work was for this day for us to see that this come true. And so we wanted to share the journey.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions and information on the show are not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.